It was just before sunrise when my whole house shook like something out of a war movie. The boom was so loud, I honestly thought a plane had crashed or someone set off dynamite right outside. I jumped out of bed, heart racing, no clue what was going on. My dogs were barking like crazy, and I could hear the cattle freaking out in the distance. I ran to the front window and saw smoke rising where my main ranch gate used to be. That's when it hit me. Someone had blown it up. And the wildest part? The sheriff, the actual county sheriff, was asleep in my guest room when it happened. We had no idea what we were walking into, but I grabbed my flashlight and headed straight for the wreck. What I found at the gate made my jaw drop. 2 wannabe cops from the fancy neighborhood next door, standing there like they'd done something brave. This wasn't a prank. It was the start of something real stupid. I've lived on this ranch my whole life. My family's been here for 5 generations, long before there were paved roads, fancy coffee shops, or neighborhoods with names like Whispering Pines. Our land stretches out along the base of the hills, with old wooden fences that we've repaired more times than I can count. We raise cattle, grow hay, and live by the rhythm of the seasons. It's the kind of place where the mornings are quiet, except for the sound of cows calling out for feed, and the evenings are lit up by the sun dipping behind the hills, turning everything gold. Life out here isn't easy, but it's honest. There's something peaceful about checking fence lines at sunrise, fixing gates that have seen better days, or just sitting on the porch after a long day, watching the wind roll through the grass. That peace lasted for a long time, until 10 years ago. That's when the houses started going up just past the east field. Big ones. Beige. All lined up in rows like someone had copied and pasted them out of a catalog. And with them came people who thought my ranch was a problem they could fix. It started slow. One house popped up across the fence, then another, and pretty soon there was a whole row of them. Big, shiny homes with perfect lawns and names on the mailboxes. They called the place Whispering Pines, which was funny, because the only thing whispering around here used to be the wind through the grass. These new neighbors weren't used to ranch life. They didn't like the smell of cows. They didn't like the sound of roosters or tractors in the early morning. I even got a complaint once about my cows being too loud. I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. They had a homeowners association, too. Rules about what color your house could be, how short your grass had to stay, and apparently how far away cows should be from their fences. Some of them acted like they'd moved into a fancy resort, not next to a working ranch. They drove shiny SUVs, wore polos tucked into shorts, and gave me strange looks like I was the outsider. It didn't take long before they started trying to change things, like my land, my way of living, and eventually my patience. Arthur Abernathy showed up like he owned the whole mountain. He was the president of the Whispering Pines HOA, but acted more like some kind of king. Always wore pastel polo shirts that looked too tight, and his big belly made the buttons work overtime. He drove a black Escalade that he kept so clean it looked like it had never touched a dirt road. Every time he talked, it felt like he was trying to remind everyone how important he thought he was. He once called Whispering Pines the Riviera of the Rockies, and I still don't know if he was joking or just completely out of touch. He hated my ranch. He called it an eyesore. He actually sent a letter complaining that my old tractor was bringing down the view, said it was visually aggressive. I didn't even know that was a thing. He had this way of looking at me like I didn't belong on my own land, like I was a weed he couldn't pull out. The more I ignored him, the louder he got. Just when I thought Abernathy couldn't get any more ridiculous, he brought in his own security team. 2 guys, dressed like they were heading into battle, not patrolling a neighborhood full of sprinklers and garden gnomes. One of them was short, wide, and always red in the face, like his blood pressure was trying to break out of his skin. He wore a tactical vest that barely fit and had a giant fake badge that jingled when he walked. We started calling him Rambo. The other one was tall, quiet, and had this dead-eyed stare like he was waiting for aliens to land. We called him Terminator. They drove around in a souped-up golf cart with flashing lights, pretending it was a police cruiser. One time, Rambo shouted through a plastic megaphone that my cow was loitering with intent. Another time, they stood by the fence with binoculars, writing stuff down like my cows were up to something illegal. It was so stupid it was almost impressive. They acted like they were the law, but really they were just playing dress-up. Only instead of pretending to be superheroes, they picked Mall Cop Meets Cowboy movie. And somehow, they decided I was the bad guy. One afternoon, I was out checking a fence line on my ATV when I saw their golf cart rolling up over the hill, lights flashing like they were chasing a bank robber. They pulled right up to my side of the fence, then kept going. Crossed onto my land like they had a right to be there. Rambo hopped out first, chest puffed out, hand resting on his taser. "Sir, this is a restricted zone," he said, breathing hard like he'd just run a mile. Terminator just stood behind him, staring like usual. I cut the engine and looked at them. "This is private land," I said. "Been in my family for over 100 years. You're trespassing." Rambo didn't like that. Said they were there on official HOA business, sent by Abernathy to enforce community rules. I told him those rules stop at the fence. My lawyer had already explained it all. My ranch isn't part of their HOA. They had no power here. I kept calm, didn't raise my voice. After a tense pause, they backed off, muttering about reports. That's when I knew this wasn't over. I installed more cameras the next day. From that moment on, I documented everything. A week after that fence line showdown, I got a letter in the mail. Thick envelope, fancy-looking paper, and a law firm name I'd never heard of. Inside was a long, angry letter full of legal-sounding nonsense. Abernathy claimed my front gate, yeah, the one that had been standing there longer than his entire neighborhood, was blocking historic access to some made-up path and didn't match their aesthetic code. He gave me 7 days to tear it down, or he'd have it removed himself and send me the bill. I almost laughed. But instead I called my lawyer, Ben. He's a smart guy who doesn't put up with bull. Ben read the letter, shook his head, and said, "This guy's full of it." He wrote back with a real legal response, full of land records, property rights, and all the proof we needed. We sent it certified mail, return receipt, and everything. Abernathy even signed for it himself. I figured that'd be the end of it. No way someone would actually try something after being told flat out they had no legal ground. I should have known better. With people like Abernathy, losing doesn't mean stopping. It just means he's about to do something dumber. That Friday, my old friend Jim, who just so happens to be the county sheriff, called and said he needed a break. He asked if the guest room was still open, and I told him to come on down. He showed up late afternoon, wearing jeans and a flannel, looking glad to be away from town politics and paperwork. We sat on the porch, drinking iced tea and watching the sun go down over the hills. I filled him in on everything. Abernathy, the fake cops, the legal threats. Jim shook his head and laughed, but not in a happy way. "Sounds like this guy's playing mayor in a world that doesn't need one," he said. He told me to keep recording everything and to be careful. "People like that don't like being told no," he added. We joked a bit, but even then, something didn't sit right with me. The air felt too still, like a storm was building, but hadn't hit yet. The next few days were too quiet. Rambo and Terminator didn't say anything, didn't cross the fence, didn't even send one of their goofy fake citations. But they were still there, watching. One afternoon, one of my ranch hands told me he saw their golf cart parked near the edge of whispering pines for over an hour. Rambo was sitting there with binoculars, just staring across the field like he was on a stakeout. They didn't do anything, but it felt off. That kind of stillness doesn't usually mean peace. It means something's coming. That evening, Jim and I grilled some steaks and tried to relax, but I couldn't shake the feeling in my gut. It wasn't just nerves. It was the kind of feeling you get when animals go quiet and the air feels too heavy. I went to bed uneasy, not sure what was coming, but certain it wasn't going to be good. At exactly 4:58 a.m., my whole house shook like something had hit it. The sound was so loud, I thought a gas line blew or maybe a truck crashed into the barn. Windows rattled, a picture fell off the wall, and my dogs went nuts. I jumped out of bed, yanked on my boots, and grabbed the flashlight. Jim was already in the hallway, still in his pajama pants but wide awake, eyes sharp. "What in the hell was that?" he said, already moving. We both ran out the front door, and right away I smelled smoke, thick, bitter, with a sharp chemical bite. At the end of my driveway, where the main gate used to stand, was nothing but a mess of twisted metal, splintered posts, and a small fire still burning in the gravel. It looked like a bomb had gone off, and standing right there, lit up by the glow, were Rambo and Terminator, both in their tactical vests, both looking way too proud of themselves. Rambo even held some kind of remote in his hand, like he'd just won a game. That's when Jim stepped forward, badge showing and voice loud. "County Sheriff, don't move!" Jim didn't waste a second. He stepped into the headlights with his badge clipped to his shirt and his service weapon drawn. "Hands where I can see them," he shouted. His voice cut through the smoke like a blade. Rambo froze, then dropped the remote like it had turned red hot. That smug look he had earlier? Gone. His face went pale, and he started stammering. Sheriff, this was official HOA business." Jim didn't blink. "You blew up private property with an explosive. That's not business. That's a felony." Terminator stood still, looking like he'd just realized he was in way over his head. Jim kept his gun trained on them until they finally dropped to their knees. "You're under arrest for destruction of property, reckless endangerment, and probably a few other things I'll think of on the way to the station," he said, cuffing them one by one. The whole time, Rambo kept mumbling something about Abernathy authorizing it, but Jim wasn't listening. He was calm, but you could see it in his face. He was done with the games. Within minutes, more deputies showed up. Sirens, flashing lights, the whole deal. The place looked like a crime scene out of a movie, only this one was real, and it was mine. The bomb squad came out too. They checked the remains of the gate and the burned spot in the ground. Turned out whatever Rambo and Terminator used wasn't some backyard firework. It was real, commercial-grade blasting material. If Jim and I had been standing just a little closer, one of us could have ended up in the hospital. Or worse. That thought hit hard. Once the cuffs were on, and the shock started to wear off, Rambo cracked like an old board. He started pointing fingers, saying Abernathy gave the orders, that he even helped get the explosives. Terminator didn't say much, but he didn't deny anything either. The deputies hauled both of them off, one in each car. Watching them go, still in their tactical gear but looking like scared kids, I finally started to believe it might be over. But I had a feeling the biggest fall was still coming. Later that morning, the deputies paid Abernathy a visit. He answered the door wearing silk pajamas and a robe with his initials stitched on the chest, looking like he thought he was some kind of movie star. The moment he saw the badge and heard the word warrant, he tried to take control, puffing out his chest and talking about how he was the HOA president and had powerful friends. But none of that mattered. The deputies didn't flinch. They read him his rights and cuffed him right there on his fancy stone porch, in full view of his shocked neighbors, who were out walking dogs or picking up their mail. All that power he thought he had? Gone in a flash. You could almost see it fall off him as they walked him to the patrol car. His big plans, his control over the neighborhood, his little security army, done. Just like that. After the dust settled, my lawyer Ben got to work. We filed lawsuits against Abernathy, Rambo, Terminator, and the entire HOA. With all the evidence, the video footage, the letters, the explosives, it wasn't even a close case. The insurance company settled fast, and the payout was big. More than enough to rebuild the gate, this time stronger, with steel beams and concrete footers. That thing's not going anywhere. Abernathy's personal assets took a hit too, and the HOA board was completely dissolved. The people left in Whispering Pines weren't happy about any of it, but most of them were just as shocked as I was. A new board was voted in, made up of folks who actually wanted to be good neighbors. They got rid of the whole security force for good, and even asked for my input on how we could get along better. After everything, the fence line felt a little quieter. And for once, it stayed that way. In the end, I rebuilt the gate taller, stronger, and with a fresh coat of paint that made it shine in the morning sun. Jim finally got his quiet weekend, though now he jokes that visiting my place should come with hazard pay. Looking back, it still blows my mind how far some people will go just to feel important. Abernathy thought he could run things with titles and threats, but real law doesn't bend for power trips. He learned that the hard way. Me? I got my peace back, along with a story I'll be telling for years. Ever had to deal with a neighbor or HOA that completely lost it? Drop it in the comments. I gotta hear what you went through.